Number 14, the element of assumption. Critical thinking is thinking about your thinking to make it better and adopting traits that make it possible. All critical thinking consists of 8 fundamental elements. Mind your P's and Q's to avoid the CIA. Assumption. The 8th and final fundamental element of reasoning is assumption. Assumption? How can this be? Don't you normally want to eliminate assumptions from your thinking? Assumptions are those things we take for granted. Often we make implicit assumptions without being fully conscious of them. But making assumptions is absolutely necessary when it comes to reasoning. Why is this so? Because not everything can be a suspended question all at once. Without making some assumptions, reasoning would have no basis, no foundation upon which it could be developed. Dr. Richard Paul points out that reasoning without making any assumptions is unintelligible. We want to make justified, reasonable assumptions, but we must make them in order to reason. For example, one assumption I'm making is that people will find this information useful and stimulating. If I didn't believe that, if I didn't make that assumption, then I wouldn't do this. It would be a waste of my time. In our communications, we may make assumptions that others understand our allusions. If I'm with a group of people who enjoy Shakespeare, I might use allusions from his plays in making some point. I assume people will understand because of their familiarity with Shakespeare. Or if I'm a military member and my speech to other military members might be peppered with acronyms, it's perfectly understandable to them, but I wouldn't assume that others would know those. When we are thinking critically, it is often useful to explicitly question our assumptions, bring them to the surface, and to ensure that they are reasonable or justified. We may even decide there are better assumptions we could make for our purpose. Assumption is a fundamental element of reasoning itself. You can't reason without it. Without taking some things for granted, our thinking could make no forward progress. Everything would be a suspended question. Now you have been exposed to all of the elements of reasoning. Remember the memory trick? Perhaps you've already devised your own. With it, you can list the elements of reasoning. Mind your P's and Q's to avoid the CIA. What are they? The elements of reasoning, they are purpose, point of view, question, concept, information, inference, implication, and assumption. It's important to note that the order here, it doesn't really matter. The order I use is simply a natural consequence of my memory trick. Simply ensures that I don't miss any one of them. Now, can you describe each one? Can you clearly state the element, expound upon it, utilize examples, or illustrate it in some way? Can you CI it? Why is this so important? Why do we keep on harping on this? It's because this is the test of true knowledge. And until you achieve this kind of knowledge, the concepts of reasoning will simply be a group of kind of inert terms. To become a critical thinker, you must truly know the elements of reasoning. Without this explicit knowledge, I'm afraid you're easy pickings for those who do understand and misuse this knowledge to manipulate you for their own ends. In the next presentation, the 15th out of 34, we will transition to the next conceptual leg of our definition of critical thinking, the universal standards of reasoning itself.